Hello, and welcome to Lesson 9 of Learning Python. Today, we're going to talk about all the problems that are wrong with the program that we put together in Lesson 8 for listing the market. So the OANDA 1 program is what we are going to talk about today. What is wrong with it and how to fix it. Now, it works wonderfully well, as we can see, and it even sorts based upon the spread. But because it works, well, what's wrong with it? Actually, quite a bit. And we are going to talk about that. So let's get straight into the code and really go through and talk about the problems that this code has. Okay, all of this up here is pretty straightforward and easy. Remember that all of this here is OANDA's library functions with the abbreviated versions to making it easy for typing and working with the library on a regular basis. You will find this used very commonly in Python, and it's something that really does work great when used properly. Our little inspection function that we made, and now we get to the beginning. Right here, the load credentials section. We actually have several major problems here that we need to address. One, and first and foremost, is just not overly clear. Your main part of your program should be clean and simple. It should be elegant to be readable. Having this here and not as a standalone function is the first major problem that we will need to address. Second, we don't deal with the problem of actually having to figure out what happens if we don't have exactly 2 lines of text, or at least 2 lines of text. This program just goes out and reads 2 lines, assuming that the text file is going to be correct. That is a major issue that will cause problems in the future. So it will need to be addressed straight away. Now, let's keep going. This is another area. It's just clunky the way it looks. This really should, again, be a separate function that isolates only this particular necessity. Here it kind of gets a little bit difficult, but I'm going to explain this in sections. Let's start with this line connects to the OANDA server directly. We need to have a way of retrying it if it fails. But you'll see this line here, here, and one other place maybe. No, just 2 places in this program. But we need, again, and rather than writing the retry loop here in 2 different sections, we need to consolidate this whole process into one simple function. The same thing with all of this. We need to tighten it up and make it read eloquently. That is something that this just does not do very well. Now, nothing changes the sort command. It's pretty much what it is. And same thing with these. These are nice and simple. And of course, this is pretty straightforward as well. So we need to focus on just cleaning up this collection here and really, 1, reusing code with a retry loop, and 2, making it more readable. And that is exactly what I have done with version 2 of the program. So you'll see we have all of the library information that we had. And now we have the get credentials. So now we have a nice, neat, tidy little way of getting the credentials. And we're using a try except. So because we don't know that the file is properly formatted, we're going to try to open it and read everything. If it works out great, we're done. If it doesn't, then we tell the user, hey, there's something wrong with the file, go fix it. And then we stop the program. If the program doesn't exist, or if the file doesn't exist, then we tell the user, hey, you need this file. And at the end of it, we return the credentials back to the main program, because we need to use this throughout the program quite a bit. So we need to have this function give the main part of the program the information it needs. So as you can see, try and accept are the perfect way for dealing with file information that may not be complete. And we don't really know if it is or isn't until we try it. So now let's look at the Exchange login. As you can see, we have called it OANDA login. And we set up all the variables just like we did before. And we return the variable back to the main program. Nice, simple, easy. Not much of a change here. Just instead of having it in the middle of the program, we strictly have it in the beginning as a function. And this is the workhorse, the retry loop. This is what we would have to type around both of those lines if we were to put it in the main body of the code. So first we retry 0, retry limit 3. So we set up our retry conditions. No more than 3 tries and then we're out. Done is false while not done. So while we are not done retrying the condition and finding out what's going on, continue this block of code. Continue trying to get the server information. So now here is the line that got repeated, and this actually gets repeated a lot in a large program, which means this retry loop is going to be used heavily. Now let's talk about how we're setting this up. I have the word function here, then I have the OANDA information from the login, and then I have the request that the previous functions give us. We'll see this later on better, but those are passed in and given. And I got a typo here. So if the retry is greater than the limit, then we're done. Convert the error. That's what this means. Except exception. This is a special situation in Python, and we want to save it as the letter E for error. It's only going to be used here. You could say E, you could say error, anything that helps you understand the process. Print it. Remember, we have to convert it to a string, because in Python, the error is actually not a string. It's a special kind of container that we'll talk about in the future. But for now, just convert it to a string. and it will print what's wrong with the program. And then exit the program. Now here we're using what's called an F string, and we're converting error into a variable that we can then print in a nice fancy way. Function. This is what we want this function to do. Get the market, get the ticker, check the price, whatever. You put this text into this section. And we'll see that as we get down further below. Then we put the retry loop. The +1 is because our retry starts at 0. We don't want to say retrying 0. We want retrying 1, retrying 2. And then we want the error message in string format. Now this is a cleaner way of being able to combine different components to display on a screen or in a log file that make more sense to the user. And of course, if everything works great, meaning we got the results back, we're done. So if everything's all nice and good and the server gave us an answer, we're done with the loop. And we bump the retry counter no matter what. And then we give the user the result. What did OANDA say? Here's your result. Everything worked the way it should. This looks confusing, but remember, it's not that different than a lot of the other stuff that we've done in the previous lessons. This is where you take the components you've learned, each one piece by piece, and now you begin combining them in different ways to take those results to the next level. So instead of checking the string that a user types, now we're checking the results that a server gives us. And we're making sure if we get an error that we go back and we retry it. So now we see the first fruits of it. We're going to get the market. Here it is. We give this function the OANDA login information and our credentials. And from here, it creates the market string, and then it gets the request and gives it to OANDA's server. As I said, function is what we give it so that when something breaks and it prints something on the screen, we know what it was doing at that time. The login information and the request of the previous line. If it all works out well, then we have the results to give back to the user. You begin to see just how easy this is to read when you start breaking things down into smaller components. And now, here's the one part that was a bit messy in version 1. The ticker. Here you can see this is the same thing we had in version 1, just more isolated. So get ticker, we pass in the login information, we pass in the credentials, and we pass in the symbol we want. From here, we create the request, then we try to issue the request with the retry loop. So if something goes wrong, this will go back and retry it. If it's successful, we get the ticker variable, and then we build our Forex dictionary with the bid, ask, and spread information. Once we have that built, we give it back to the user. And now we begin to see just how easy this reads. All of that code that was above, or that was here as get credentials, is now above in the function. So we come into our main code. Credentials equals get credentials. We're done. Nice and simple. One line of code, it does it for us. The beauty of this is as we continue to build within our program, as we continue to work towards our trading bot, we now have bits and pieces already pre-built that we can use in the future, and perhaps even turn into our own library, where we can simply refer to this information appropriate to what we're doing. Here we log into the server. All of that code is now one simple line. Login. OANDA login. Here's my credentials. So we have made our main code body incredibly easy. And as we move forward, we can take this structure with us into each version we write and make our programming more and more organized. The more organized it is, the easier it is to read, the easier it is to fix when things break. And now we take and we get our markets. Same thing, pass in the login, pass in the credentials. And now we go through the process that we did of going through the market piece by piece. All the market data, pulling the ticker for each asset, and then plugging in the information. And notice all that stuff we did with the Forex pairs, all that, gone. This is literally our entire market vectoring mechanism right now. Because get ticker does all of that big clunk of code for us as one simple function. So we've reduced a very large amount of code into just one line in our main program. And we've taken it in such a way that when we use get ticker, we will always get the same information back for future programs. So all that work is done for us. All we have to do is just copy that structure as we move forward. And of course, the hardest line in the whole program, it's still the same. I've covered this in the last lesson pretty thoroughly, so I'm not really going to go over it here. But be sure to check out the last lesson, because this is important. But understand it's not necessarily something you're going to use a lot of frequently unless you're specifically into data processing. This is something you're going to have to probably look up every time you need a special case situation like what we are working on. If you do use it frequently, you will become used to the way it looks, and you will be able to simply type it without looking it up. That is, you'll remember it because you've used it. If you don't use it often, you're not going to remember it. Don't force yourself to. Let yourself remember automatically what you use the most of. And of course, we wrap up the program with our fancy header and with our market list printing one by one. So let's see how this actually runs. If everything is done right, you won't see the difference. And that's exactly the case. No difference. It still runs the same, it still performs the same, and it still does extremely well. And here's an opportunity we don't see very often in the market. The Hong Kong dollar having a very low spread, only 4 pips. That's interesting that it beat out the US dollar, Canadian dollar, and the Aussie US dollar. Even the Euro US dollar has a higher pip spread right now. So tools like this give you an edge. You know where the best opportunities are because of these tools. Remember, your first version is always going to be your worst version. When you're done getting your concept right, then it's time to go back and put it together in a meaningful way. It's time to hone it down, clean it up, focused on the real things. Get it to where it is in a professional state. All programs start out with the version 1 being a mess. They're supposed to, they need to, because your first version must focus on your concepts. Your second, third, and fourth version, that's where you fix all your problems. And it might take 2 versions, it might take 90 versions. And that depends on how complex your project is. Here we've got it pretty well resolved to just 2 versions for the market listing program that does an exceptional job of getting things really honed in tightly and cleanly. Get credentials, all of this code, every last bit of it, down to 1 line in the main body. And it works really nice. Exchange login or OANDA login, same thing. 1 line, OANDA login. From that 1 line, we can carry this forward to any number of programs we want in the future. The workhorse, the retry loop. This is something, imagine having a program. Imagine having to put this in 20 times, or 30 times, or 40 times. That is, every time you send a request to the OANDA server, having to code this entire mess. After a while, your program is going to get hard to read. It's going to become messy and difficult to maintain. By looking for these type of situations, where certain things get repeated constantly, you can make your program cleaner, simpler, and easier to maintain, and more efficient in the long run. Now this can be done a lot more to it. For example, we can log our messages to a file, because eventually we're not going to have a screen connected to this. It's just going to run in the background doing trades for us. So we're not going to be there to see what happens on the screen. So let's go to a file instead. As an example. And all this is just repeating everything we've done in the previous lessons with a new and specific approach. Rather than getting something off of the keyboard, or rather than looking for specifics for a random number, we are trying to get a request from OANDA. And here we see the actual usage. The get markets function. You could put get the markets, you could put whatever you want here. But I wanted it to keep it simple and match what I was doing, so if an error took place, I knew exactly what the error came from. In this case, it came from trying to get the markets. So you see a real-world approach. Instead of having 20 lines, we have 1 line. That's it. Same thing down here. When we're getting the ticker, instead of 20 lines, we have 1 line. It makes it easy and efficient, and it makes it appropriate for reading and seeing where problems are. And having the functions the way we have them gives us a way to take these functions as they are, build our own library, build on them, use them in the future, because we have working, easy functions that are clean and efficient. They do the job, and they can be taken into any future program. And now we get to the main code. You can see just how easy it is to read, follow, and understand as we have simplified it by using the functions, by using the abilities of the code to isolate problems and then solve those specific problems. So version 1, clunky, horrible, and a lot wrong with it. Version 2 is really a nice program. And it's easier to actually understand what's going on because you don't have to understand the whole main section in one chunk. You now can look at each section compartmentalized and fragmented so that each section becomes easier to understand. Breaking the problem down into smaller sections is how you solve bigger problems. And then finally, we take everything we've done and we actually put out a nice little table on the screen that gives us a very good look at the market. Now remember to check out this program on the GitHub. That link will be in the description. Try it. Play with it. Try to sort it by the bid price. Try to sort it by the asking price or the selling price. See how well and see how it runs. We see here the Aussie dollar is now the king of the hill, or the cheapest asset. We also see the US dollar, Canadian dollar. So we see just in that short bit of time, just how quickly the market changed. And we can even take and use a Linux command that will watch the market every 5 seconds. Well, providing I get the command right. So every 5 seconds, it will actually print a list on the screen of the prices. We can actually see in semi-real time what the market is doing. This becomes important as we move forward with other programs, such as looking at the order book or even watching our trading live. Having tools available is critical. Understanding those tools and how they are going to work is important. And you can see the updates by watching the time. And you can see it actually takes us 10 seconds to generate this list. Even though we say we want it every 5, the program can only run once every 10 seconds. Because it's actually taking 10 seconds to get all of this information from the server. So that will help you as well. And there's even more you can do with this. For example, if you really want to know how long it's going to take, Linux provides a special command that actually times how long the program takes. And it takes 3 seconds for it to run completely this time. So as you can see, your times are going to differ, they're going to vary, and they're not always going to run as quickly as you want. That's why we need the retry loops. That's why we need to compartmentalize the program based upon sections of complexity. We need to be able to hunt down and figure out what needs fixing, where it needs fixing, and why it needs fixing. If it's in one big mess, you can't do that easily. But something like what we have now, you can now begin to really see the program, find its weak points, and begin to try to fix them if possible. Some of it might just be the time of day and the amount of traffic the server is facing. And you will get that extensively throughout major market events. But because we can now see it clearly, we can identify it, and then we can decide how we want to deal with it within the program itself. So, there we have it. Version 2 working beautifully. And it gives us a blueprint to move forward that we are going to use extensively. So by the time we are done and we do get to our bot, we're going to have some very nice functions to work with. Let me know if you have any questions. Try the program, test it, play with it, watch it. Until next time.